The study of the providence of God obviously is profound. Not only is it profound, it is encouraging, and ultimately it is faith-building. And it builds our faith knowing that God is still in control, that He will always be in control, and that He is still working today. Though we may not know He is working, we know that He is. And as Christians, as we believe, and as we trust in the providence of God, we readily admit that a study of His providential workings does have its perplexities. We do not always see, nor do we know when or how God uses an occasion or event to bring about His will. So because we do not know or cannot know everything that relates to how God works providentially behind the scenes, we walk by faith, or we must walk by faith, and not by sight, according to Paul's words in 2 Corinthians 5, in verse number 7. And that's the challenge, is to continue to walk by faith, because as God's people, what may be a plan of God may be a puzzle to you and I. And one thing that may puzzle you and I, and one thing that puzzles many people today, and which has led many to deny the existence of God, is the reality of adversity in one's life. Now, tonight our lesson is going to consider the providence of God in light of the adversity we face in this life. And in our study, we will define what it is we mean by adversity. We're going to consider why God allows us to face adverse situations and circumstances. We'll look at some biblical examples of God using the adversity of His people to bring about His will and to bring about greater faith in them that works things out for a greater spiritual good. And then we're going to derive some practical applications for us today. That is, how you and I can benefit from adversity ourselves. That is, if we choose to do so. And again, our choices play a vital role in this. So with these thoughts in mind, let's look at adversity. Let's first of all define what we mean. Adversity, simply defined, and I've taken these from a variety of dictionaries. Adversity simply is defined as difficulties, misfortune, a state or instance of serious or continued difficulty or misfortune. It is an event or series of events which oppose success or desire. It can also mean misfortune, calamity, affliction, distress, or a state of unhappiness. So adversity is certainly negative in its connotation. And certainly we do face negative things and negativity in our life, sometimes on a daily basis. Now, when you think about some synonyms of adversity, well, there's a lot of synonyms. Misfortune, trouble, difficulty, hardship, distress, disaster, suffering, sorrow, misery, tribulation, woe, pain, trauma, setbacks, crises, a catastrophe, tragedy, calamity, trial, burden, or blow. These are all synonyms, or they are all closely connected and related to the overall theme of adversity. So we're all very familiar with those words. Now, what are the forms of adversity we face? Well, we can, lose our health. Loss of health is adversity, and sometimes we deal with it negatively because we're perplexed. Why is it happening to me? Loss of property or belongings, natural disasters, death, loss of a job or income, loss of friends, persecution. And the list could go on. We face adversity comes in many different forms or fashions, does it not? In fact, one more synonym we might add is challenge. Adversity is a challenge to us. And we all face challenges. And these challenges come, as we note here on the screen, in a variety of forms. And certainly that list is not all inclusive. I'm pretty sure you could sit here and name several others that I could not think of. But that, in a nutshell, is how we define adversity and how it comes at us in a variety of ways, and different ways we can label it. But now, as we think about it in a deeper perspective, let's first of all recognize what Christ said in John chapter 16, verse 33. I've got the wrong scripture reference. I've got John 6:33. It really should be John 16:33. In this passage, Christ told his disciples, "In the world ye shall have tribulation." Now, you would notice, and again, tribulation here is a synonym for adversity. So we might change that word out, tribulation, with the word adversity. In this world ye shall have adversity, or adverse situations. Now, notice that Christ didn't say you possibly would or you might have tribulation or adversity. He said, ye shall have it. But he also goes on to tell his disciples there to be of good cheer. And he would say, you can be cheerful because I have overcome the world. Christ overcame his adversity. And that would be the adversity of being delivered up to be crucified at the hands of the Romans. And certainly his crucifixion, as we continually affirm, and as the scriptures attest, was prophesied. It was foreseen by God, purposed by God. And they did what God wanted to. He was in control there. But certainly when we think about it from Christ's perspective, it was still adversity. But here he talks about having overcome it, coming it, being triumphant over it, even before it happened. And so that gives us encouragement as Christians tonight. Because if Christ overcame, and he did, then you and I can overcome. Will it always be easy? Absolutely not. But we can do it. Remember what Paul said, I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. So we got to have that I can mindset. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to have, is the I can, because a lot of times we want to say I can't. But now let's consider some questions. Why do we face adversity? Why does God allow us to face and have to deal with adversity? Shouldn't an all good, all benevolent, all loving God make things easy on us? Why does God allow bad things to happen? Why does he allow us to suffer? And this is the question atheists and skeptics raise. And what they fail to consider is this: our free will. Do you realize ever since the disastrous choice of Adam and Eve to violate God's command to not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden, that adversity has plagued mankind? Because of their choice. And certainly that was by their own choice, their own free will. They chose to sin against God. And we understand that adversity comes in some mild fashion, some very seriously. But yet adversity is the result of our exercising free will. And some adversity is the result, however, of things out of our control. In fact, sometimes we face adversity due to the choices of others. You know, you think about families who lose loved ones because some person got in their car drunk out of their minds. And the innocent person loses their life while the drunk individual walks away. Would we not say that the adversity that family faces was caused by the choice of another individual? It was caused by something out of that family's control? Indeed, we would. And so we remember that choices have consequences, and those choices can have far-reaching effects. And they can affect many other people, not just ourselves. And sometimes we simply face adversity due to things out of our control or anyone else's control. And so we face adversity, and that's one of the reasons why we face adversity, is because of our free will. And certainly we see the chain reaction that was set off by Adam and Eve's choice. And you think about how bad the world became, and you think about how things changed after the flood. It certainly did not change for the better. And certainly we face natural disasters in all sorts of other things. Now, the second question is there any purpose in adversity? Can there any good come from adversity? And I will affirm tonight that yes. Yes, there is. Now, those who deny that God is claim that since we don't know a good purpose for some adversity, does not mean there is no good purpose for it. And certainly this is fallacious reasoning and faulty reasoning, because there are many things you and I do not know or we cannot know. Remember, and what they fail to take into consideration is we are not all-knowing. We are finite minds. We are limited in our knowledge because we're not God. If we knew everything, we'd be God, wouldn't we? But we're not. Now, y'all, we also recognize there are things we now know that we did not know previously, because every day, we might say, is a learning experience. Sometimes in adverse situations, we may not know what good can come from them right then. Now, in the future, we may be able to look back and say, well, looking back now, I understand what I was going through, and I can see how this helped me and how I've become a better person from it. And the reason we can say that at times is because we have discovered the good that actually can come from such circumstances. And when we look back, we can find good if we look for it. We can find a way to benefit. However, we also should not expect to know the purpose for everything. Again, we're finite minds. Our knowledge is limited. And such, it should not surprise us that we do not know the reason for all adverse situations we face in life, nor can we explain all the adversity mankind faces. Remember what Moses told Israel in Deuteronomy 29, verse 29, that secret things belong unto the Lord our God. But those things which are revealed belong unto us. So there are things we cannot know, and we should never presume to know. Even Job himself admitted he said things he probably shouldn't have in presuming things. In Job 42, verse 3, Job confessed that I have uttered what I did not understand. We've done that before, haven't we? We've said things that we shouldn't have because we didn't understand. He goes on to say, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. He admitted his ignorance in the matter, and he freely confessed he shouldn't have said those things. So we should never presume to know everything. But from these facts, as we have set forth, our faith in God is reasonable. It is rational. Even though we do not always know the why things happen, at least we know why we do not know why. And I know why I don't know why. It's because I cannot know everything. Because I'm not God. As Christians, we do know the one who knows all things and who can and does work all things together for good to them that love Him. Romans 8:28. Now, this does not mean everything that happens to us is good. That's not what we're saying. This does say and teach that God can use even the most adverse of circumstances and work them to bring about greater good in our lives. And that should give us a sense of assurance, a sense of peace, and it should encourage us and strengthen our faith in Him. And remember, God will never leave us nor forsake us because He sees what we go through. And that is why He asks us, He pleads with us to cast all of our cares upon Him because He cares for us. We need to trust Him. We need to rely upon Him. Because there are some purposes for adversity, as we can know. We can know some purposes. Number one, adversity shows us that life is not easy. It's not a rose garden. It is a battlefield in which many great battles will be fought. In fact, we're in a battle right now. Satan's at war with us, is he not? He is that roaring lion walking about seeking whom he may devour. And so he wants to lead us away from Christ. He wants us to doubt our faith. And so we are in a warfare. We are not in a carnal warfare, but a spiritual warfare. We're in a battle for our soul. And so we must be on guard. Christianity is not an easy way of life, but it is the most rewarding. And we are going to be faced with challenges. The challenge of temptation. But yet God provides a way of escape. We'll talk more about that later on down the line, not in this lesson. And because life is not easy, it holds that we're going to face much adversity in this life. We're going to face many challenges. But then number two, and this is what we're going to come back to at the end of the lesson, adversity can help build our character. It has been astutely observed that we learn more enduring lessons through pain or adversity than we do pleasure. There is no Bible verse that says, I am happy, be ye happy, saith the Lord. There are verses that say, be ye holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy. Since God is a moral being who made us moral beings like Himself, and He wants us to be like Him, It is understandable that he would be more interested in our character than our comfort, more concerned about our holiness than our happiness. Now, he does say that if we serve him faithfully, that if we submit our lives to him and that we serve him faithfully, well, then we'll be happy. That's where true happiness comes from, is it not? It's knowing you can pillow your head at night, knowing that I have a crown of life that awaits me if I am faithful unto death. That makes me happy, and that should make every Christian happy, should it not? You know, that promise of God motivates us and stimulates us to press on in this present world. And we're going to come back to this. Number 3, adversity shows us that we are not in control of this world. It shows to us, however, there is one greater, one superior and all-powerful who is in control. And that is God. And ultimately, he's going to right all the wrongs that are committed in this world come Judgment Day. But then finally in this point, adversity shows us the need to trust in God and lean upon God. In both the good times and the bad, I would suggest it's easy to love and serve God in the good times. It's when the badder times come or the times of adversity arise, that's when the rubber hits the road, is it not? That reveals much about who we are. God's people, when you study the Scriptures, have always had to deal with adversity at times in their lives. And the Bible is replete with examples. And even then, as we're going to see here in just a moment, even in these examples, we're going to find the faithful were even perplexed. Even those most faithful were perplexed at times. So as Christians tonight, if there are times in our lives we find ourselves perplexed, don't feel bad. And we're going to talk about that right now. Because as we think about examples of adversity, well, I didn't get my animations on this. We're going to go through these one by one. You'll see Gideon, first of all. When you look at Judges chapter 6, Gideon was raised up by God to deliver Israel. Because Israel had sinned against God, and because they had rebelled, and they turned away from him, God delivered his people into the hands of the Midianites. And Israel was oppressed for 7 years, and that's found in Judges 6, 1 through 5. However, during this situation, Israel cried out unto God for deliverance. They returned unto God. And it is here that the angel of God appeared unto Gideon and appointed him as the chosen of God who would deliver Israel from Midianite oppression. However, Gideon, upon hearing the declaration, verse number 12, that God was with him and that he would be with Israel, well, he was perplexed. And he asked in verse number 13, if the Lord be with us, then why is all of this befallen us? Why are we undergoing this calamity if God is with us? See, his perplexity. And where be all his miracles which our fathers told us of, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord hath forsaken us and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites. Gideon initially, and like so many who reject God today, thought God had to work miraculously to bring about good. He failed to reckon with the providence of God, which works through natural law in means such as individuals to bring about his purposes. Here, God was going to work through Gideon, not Midian. They rhyme, Gideon and Midian. But he was going to work through Gideon and a small band of men to deliver his people from the hands of their oppressors. But then you come to Joseph, perhaps one of the greatest examples of God's providential working in all the Bible. And we'll deal more with him fully in a lesson to come. But Joseph faced much adversity, did he not? From his brothers envying him because of his father's favor toward him and his coat, which resulted in his brothers ultimately selling him into slavery and then telling his father that he had been killed by a wild beast. Remember, they dipped his coat in animal blood. And then from being falsely accused of Potiphar's wife, wrongly of attempting to commit adultery with her, to being imprisoned. Joseph's life was full of adversity. However, we understand that Joseph did persevere through this adversity. Ultimately, he came to rise up to be second in command in Egypt. And after being reunited with his family, Joseph told his brothers that they had thought evil against him, but ultimately God meant those things which occurred, that is, God used those events unto good, according to Genesis 50, verse 20. Did he understand initially why those things were going on? No, but ultimately he came to recognize, hey, things worked out good. God worked these things together for greater good. There can be no doubt that Joseph was perplexed. But again, in looking back, he could recognize the good that came about that was worked by God in his mighty hand. And again, it was behind the scenes work. You think about Job, who faced adversity on all fronts. He suffered physically, loss of his health. Emotionally, the loss of his family. He suffered taunts from his wife, who told him to curse God and die. His so-called friends were of no comfort to him. And certainly Job did not understand why he was suffering as he was. He was perplexed, but yet even in his perplexity, he recognized that he was being put to the test. Job said in Job 23:10, He, that is God, knoweth the way I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. In other words, he said, I'm going to come forth better off. When you look at his latter days, Job was blessed in his latter days more so than in the beginning, according to Job 42, verse 12. And so even in the midst of his adverse situation, Job was able to see the spiritual good. And as such, he ultimately reaped the blessings for remaining faithful to God. Now we come to the Apostle Paul. You look at his perplexity. You think about the adversity he faced, especially in reading 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 24 and following. But you come now to verses 7 through 10 of chapter 12. A very familiar passage. And he says in verse number 7, he's discussing his thorn in the flesh. In verse 7, we have the purpose of Paul's thorn. Paul writes, "Unless I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations that was given to me," that is, his bona fide apostolic credentials and the fact that he was inspired by God and God had revealed much to him. "There was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure." You look at Paul's plea in verse number 8. Paul sets forth the purpose for his thorn, but now even though he knew the purpose, he still made the plea to God. He besought the Lord 3 times that it might depart from him. Now look at God's plan for Paul, verse number 9. He says, "I'm not going to take that away, Paul. You're going to have to deal with your thorn. Because you know what? My grace is sufficient for thee. For my strength is made perfect in weakness." And so you think about Paul's response to that, the praise of Paul in verse number 9. "Most gladly will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. And therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, and reproaches, and necessities, and persecutions, and distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong." By faith he accepted his situation. He recognized he faced adversity for Christ's sake. But yet, even in all the adversity, in this situation, having to deal with this thorn in the flesh. And again, there's a lot of speculation as to what this thorn is. There's ideas out there, but the point here is that Paul was able to see the spiritual good in his adversity. It would be when he was weak that he would be truly strong. He would be strong in the grace of God. He would be strong in faith and strong in Christ. You know, when we deal with hardships, when we face adversity, let us remember what God told Paul, "My grace is sufficient for thee." And remember what we talked about. The reason for prayer is that we can boldly, confidently approach the throne of grace, that we may find grace to help in time of need. And certainly, adverse situations are a time of need in which we need to be praying, are they not? And so, when we approach the throne of grace, we can find that grace that is available to help us in these times. But this wasn't the only situation we find Paul perplexed. You go back to chapter 4 of 2 Corinthians, and you will find in verse number 8, Regarding his preaching, he was troubled on every side, but yet not distressed. He admitted, we're perplexed, confused, but yet not in despair. And why is that? Look at verse number 18, or verse 17. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment. You see, the adverse situations he faced, the adversity we face in this life, is but a light affliction, and it is but for a moment. You see what's happening for us if we allow it? It worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. And Paul goes on to talk about having this house in the heavens not made with hands. And it goes on to chapter 5, because we need to be looking not at the things which are seen, which are temporal. Again, think about this. Adversity can be seen. We recognize adversity, but it's only temporal. The things that are not seen are eternal. So when we are faced with adversity in this life, we can remember, we need to be reminded and encouraged by the fact that it is temporary. It's not eternal. So we can be of good cheer. And so as we look at the applications of this, I want you to think about this, what Walt Disney said. He said, all the adversity I've had in my life, all my troubles and obstacles have strengthened me. You may not realize it when it happens, but a kick in the teeth may be the best thing in the world for you. That's Mr. Walt Disney. Notice that he found value. He found great benefit in the adversity he faced. Adversity could be good for us at times. We just never know it. We can use it. You see, adversity can make us stronger. It can if we allow it to. You see, as we talked about earlier, and we're going to expand on now, it serves as a test of our character and our faith. And it can build our character. It can build our faith. And it can strengthen our character. It can strengthen our faith in God. Look, in Romans 5, verse 3 and 4, Paul affirmed that we glory in tribulations also, knowing that tribulation worketh patience, and patience experience, and experience hope. So if we allow it to, it can make us better. James 1, verse 3. The trying, the testing of our faith worketh patience. That helps us develop patience. So it has that benefit. Then you think about what the psalmist wrote in Psalm 119, verses 67 and 71. He said, before I was afflicted, I went astray. But now have I kept thy word. It is good for me that I have been afflicted, that I might learn thy statutes. In other words, he said, it's good for me to have faced adversity, because now I know better your will. I'm stronger for it. I know your will, and I know what you desire from me. And then, of course, Peter affirms that adversity is a test of our faith. In 1 Peter 1, verse 7, that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, and again, that's the fiery trials of our faith in this world, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. That's what it's all about. You see, if we come through the fire, if our faith can be forged in the fire. It can be strengthened. It can be fortified by adversity if we allow it. And in so doing, if our faith is strengthened by adversity, when we come through that fiery trial, we're going to be found into praise. We're going to be found into honor and glory when Christ comes again. But then adversity also encourages helpfulness. When we are going through deep waters, we turn for help from those who have been there and done that. But yet also when others are going through deep waters, they can turn to us for help because we've been there and done that as well. Notice what Paul said in 2 Corinthians 1, beginning with verse 3. He affirms in verse 3 that God is the God of all comfort. So comfort we get from God and His Word. Now notice verse 4. It is God through His Word who comforts us in all our tribulation. And why? Well, Paul explains that we may be able to comfort them which are in any trouble by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God. You see that? You see that? The comfort we get from God, we can use that and help others. We can comfort others with the comfort that we receive from God. And that's a beautiful thought. But it should also produce assurance in our lives as Christians. You know, adversity should remind us that this world is not our home. We're just a passing through. That our treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. Paul writes in Romans 8:18, "For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us." In other words, heaven will surely be worth it all. Far beyond the pain, the suffering, the trials we go through in this life. That's why we endure. You know, adversity is nothing new to mankind. There's no new thing under the sun. Throughout its history, man has always had to face it with adversity. But yet, as we have seen in our lesson tonight, though we face it, we can deal with it. And we can deal with it in a proper way. And that is with God and His Word. So whatever the situation in life, no matter how adverse things may be, let us always remember that God is in control. God is all-knowing. He knows the end of all things. And all good, God wants to bring all things to a good end. Because God is all-knowing. He is all good, all-powerful. He can bring all things to a good end. That is for our benefit. Bad things do happen to good people. Bad things do happen to us as God's people. We know that. But a good God has for us a good end if we trust Him. For those bad or adverse things can bring about good results. Thus our mindset at all times, even in facing adversity, should be to trust in the Lord with all of our heart and lean not unto our own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct our paths. Proverbs 3:5-6. So that when faced with adversity, we will not be overcome by it, but rather be overcomers. Tonight as a Christian, are you overcoming? Remember, faith is the victory that overcomes the world. Or perhaps you have been overcome by adversity, and if so, take your cares to God. And you can do that right now. And if you've been overcome by sin, take care of that sin as a child of God. You know what you need to do. God is there. God is waiting. And remember, God wants you to cast your care on Him because He cares for us. Don't let adversity drag you down. Trust in God. Rely upon Him. And if you've stopped, start trusting and relying upon Him once again. As together we stand, as we sing.